We begin in West Africa, where suicide bombings in crowded markets have become all too common. Over the last few months, hundreds of people have been killed in Nigeria and across the region in attacks linked to the Islamic militant group Boko Haram. Leaders have pledged more than 8,000 troops to wage an offensive, but so far funding issues have delayed the start of military operations. Nigeria's newly elected president, Muhammadu Buhari, says his top priority is tackling the insurgency.
The government that I lead is committed and will do whatever it takes to free Nigeria from the menace of terrorism. No matter how long it takes, we will reclaim every inch of Nigerian territory that is under the control of Boko Haram.
Well, joining us now from Boston is Aminu Gamawa. He's a lawyer and conflict resolution expert. And here with us in our Washington, D.C. studio is Akkuteh. He's the executive director of the African Immigrant Caucus. Thanks to both of you for joining us. As I just mentioned, the Boko Haram insurgency, now 6 years old. It's claimed the lives of 15,000 people, at least 15,000 people. How did this group emerge, and how did they become such a formidable threat in the region?
You know, actually, they came up in 2002. They announced themselves in 2002. You are right that 6 years ago in 2009, that was when they turned particularly violent and started attacking Nigerian security forces as well as Nigerian civilians. And most people attributed that their founder had been arrested and was killed in police military custody. And most people think that's what radicalized them and had them go out and attack not just the government forces, but also Nigerian civilians. You know, there are several debates about what in the environment created them. There are a number of people, you know, their very name means, is translated as meaning that they are against Western education. And so it's the whole government setup. There are others who, and they are assumed to want to replace it with Sharia-based government. There are others who think that the poverty and lack of real democracy in northeastern Nigeria is also a factor. To tell you the truth, I put less emphasis on the poverty and the bad governance because, you know, there is poverty. Nigeria is a big, rich country, but most Nigerians are pretty poor. And if poverty was the problem, I think you wouldn't have seen it just in that area. So there is a religious element, and people really don't know, but it's been said that the government, the previous government particularly, did not handle it well, and that's what caused it to explode and escalate.
I mean, if we look at the threat posed by Boko Haram, how are the countries of West Africa, particularly Nigeria, meeting this challenge?
Well, as rightly pointed out by it started as a small problem, but it has now escalated into a regional threat. The northeast of Nigeria, where the insurgency shares border with Chad, Niger, and Cameroon. The whole thing started in Nigeria, but it expanded in scope to neighboring countries. And Boko Haram has now conducted attacks in Cameroon, in Chad, and in Niger. In the past, these countries did not really cooperate in time with Nigeria. They underestimated the threat. And so far, what we are seeing now is that Boko Haram has now become a security threat, not only for Nigeria, but also for the other countries. The previous administration of Goodluck Jonathan has been accused of mismanaging the Boko Haram insurgency, and that was why it escalated into what it is today. But General Buhari, I think, contested and won the election, promising to end the insurgency. And in the last 2 months that has been in power, we have seen a renewed political commitment on the side of the Nigerian government. He has traveled to Chad, Cameroon, Niger, and Benin Republic to build a strong coalition against Boko Haram. He has appointed new security chiefs and national security advisor, and many people believe that these appointments were based on merit and they are people of integrity. He has ordered for the command center to be relocated from Abuja to Maiduguri, where the insurgency is. And he has traveled to other countries like the African Union Summit in South Africa, to G7 meeting in Germany, and he was here in the US a couple of weeks back, all in an effort to mobilize international community against Boko Haram, and also to get more equipment and more arms for the Nigerian army, which has been neglected and under-equipped for many years.
That's right, and President Buhari has made the multinational force the centerpiece of his counterterrorism strategy. Question is, where does Boko Haram get its support from? I mean, logistical support, financial support?
You know, that is a very good question, which translates as there are speculation. We don't know for sure. They, of course, claim that they capture equipment from Nigerian military units that they take over. It's been said that they get their finance from bank robberies. But in fact, you know, Aminu rightly mentioned the international focus. And my day job here in Washington is watching how the U.S. and the international community deals with Africa on different issues. And I don't mind confessing to you that I have been unhappy with Washington's attitude towards Boko Haram, especially when you look at Washington and the globe's and the international community's attitude towards ISIS. In the Middle East, you have a coalition of about 80 powerful governments who are taking ISIS seriously and giving them all the help. And in my view, they've been ignoring Boko Haram. And it fits a pattern in my decades of watching foreign policy. African issues get short-shrifted. And I have seen that. And the reason I bring that up is, you will remember that some 15 months ago, in April of last year, when the young women of Chibok were kidnapped, right. It was a big international hullabaloo. A number of women senators in the United States actually took the lead, and they were very outraged. The First Lady of the United States, Mrs. Obama, actually gave a weekend address. Normally, the president does that. She gave one and said, we are going to do everything. Frankly, I think that enough was not done. And the reason I'm bringing it up is, if the Nigerian government had gotten the help I thought it needed, they should have been able, one of the things that the U.S. could have helped with was help find where Boko Haram gets its finances from. The U.S. has great intelligence. There is also the issue of where the Chibok young women are. If they had gotten the kind of...
Where are they right now? What has happened?
Well, you know, this is the thing. We don't know. In fact, the most... on Sunday, the Nigerian military announced that they have now rescued about 168 people, most of them girls, and about 60 women and a few men, and that they've rescued them. But it's not clear that these are the Chibok girls. Now, the best speculation is that the young women, the Chibok women, and other people kidnapped have been scattered around, but most of them are in the Sambisa forest. But my point is, I think that the international community should take some of the blame for how long Boko Haram has lasted. It wasn't only the Jonathan government that dropped the ball. I feel the international community dropped the ball, did not give them the support they needed in intelligence, in air cover, and being able to find where these people are. So I'm very glad that with President Buhari, the relations, everybody can tell, I can tell, that the relations between Abuja and Washington has warmed up. When he was here, he got a lot of interaction with American policymakers. So we are looking at the follow-up to see if he will get the help he needs to be able to tackle Boko Haram, because as Aminu said, it is no longer a Nigeria problem. It is a West Africa problem.
Looking, Aminu, at the danger that Boko Haram poses to the countries of West Africa, what do we know about the relationship between Boko Haram and other militant groups like ISIS, or even for that matter, Al-Qaeda?
Well, one key or common characteristic of this organization is they all claim to be Islamic in nature, and they preach the language of jihad. So the rhetoric they use are very similar. And apart from that, sadly, even though they are claiming to be working for Muslims or protecting Muslims and Islam, their main victims actually are Muslims. In Nigeria, they have attacked mosques, they have attacked churches, they have attacked civilian targets. So if you see the nature, the brutality, the nature of their attacks, they share many things in common, the beheadings. But in the case of Boko Haram, early this year, they have issued videos which shows that they have pledged allegiance to ISIS. That they have joined the global movement by this international terrorist group to establish a caliphate. And in the videos that Boko Haram have been releasing, we've seen some of the influence actually of ISIS. But I don't want to exaggerate the international influence on Boko Haram. Boko Haram, as a local organization, was very brutal and was able to carry out many attacks and kill many people, even without joining any international network. You ask Ni Akkuteh about their source of support, maybe source of arms and ammunition and the rest. One interesting fact is that in the past, most of the arms they have acquired actually came from the Nigerian army. And even though the U.S. did not assist Nigeria as it should, one key thing that we must remember is under the Jonathan administration, there were a series of human rights reports that accused the Nigerian army of human rights violation. And the Leahy law prevents the U.S. from providing certain form of military assistance to countries whose army has been, countries that their army have been accused of human rights violations. I know that this is a bit political because still there are countries like Israel and Egypt that still receives U.S. military assistance despite human rights accusations of human rights violation. But that was one of the reasons why the U.S. was not forthcoming. But just yesterday, a delegation from the U.S. Congress was in Nigeria, and they are considering reviewing the laws, the Leahy law, so that they can provide Nigeria with equipment.
Right.
Yeah, go ahead. If I might jump on one aspect of what Aminu rightly said about the Leahy law, it is true, and if I might say so, you know, in all of my lobbying and watching U.S. foreign policy, for me, democracy comes first, and protection of human rights is a big part of it, and I support the Leahy law. But two things. The Leahy law talks about units of a military, okay? So you can find, if you really wanted to help the Nigerians, even under Jonathan, you can work with them to find units that have not been tainted, and you can help them. Secondly, as Aminu himself pointed out—
But what we have here at the moment is a blanket ban.
Yes. And who gets hurt by that? Ordinary poor Nigerians, ordinary Nigerian Muslims, because of this intransigence. But it is in the past. Jonathan is out of power. There's better relations between Washington and President Buhari, and I'm happy for that. But I want to emphasize that I see that pattern all the time, that Africa issues gets a second-hand treatment. If you look at ISIS, I mean, there's been huge accusations of human rights abuses by the groups in Iraq and units attached to the Iranian government who are fighting ISIS. They have abused human rights, but that has not stopped the international community from saying we are going to help, because first and foremost, ISIS and Boko Haram are the biggest danger. First, you crush them, and then you work on the issues. You cannot tie the hands of an army by saying, well, they have abused human rights, because if you look at just Nigeria, the Nigerian military may have been accused of human rights abuses, but we know that Boko Haram, the kinds of rights that they abuse, from slitting throats, from killing women that they say they have married, is so much worse.
Okay. I mean, despite these huge challenges that we're talking about here, if we look at the coalition that is fighting Boko Haram, led by Nigeria, they have had some success recently, haven't they?
They did indeed. One key thing is almost most of the territories that Boko Haram previously captured, which was very large, many local governments in Borno State, in Yobe, and in Adamawa, they have all been liberated, even though the internally displaced population and the refugees have not returned back to their communities. I think the military is now doing really a very commendable job. They are more committed than before. The new leadership of the army, I think, is dedicated retaliated, and the Chief of Army Staff, General Burate, was in Maiduguri, was in Damaturu to boost the morale of the troops fighting there on the ground. I think that is quite commendable. And even in Chad, they have also successfully helped in liberating the towns and villages that are in the border areas. So yes, there have been some military successes in the last couple of months. Even at the end of the administration of Jonathan, there were successes that were recorded. But as you rightly know, as you rightly pointed out, this is an insurgency. There are other cases of suicide bombings, and also the root causes of the problem also needs to be addressed. We must remember that even though this is an ideological thing, even though this is something that is religious, but there are other socio-economic factors that give birth to this. And I still believe that one of those factors is illiteracy and unemployment. So even though Akkuteh may disagree with this, I still believe that the dangerous ideology of violence which ISIS, Boko Haram, and other terrorist groups are promoting usually gain acceptance in communities that are either politically, socially, or economically marginalized. So I think one of the things that need to be addressed is, apart from defeating them militarily, we need to also address the socio-economic and political issues that make young people vulnerable to terrorist groups.